Welcome to another episode of Management Muse. I'm your host, Cindi Baldi, and this is my husband and co-host, Jeffrey Tumlin.
Yellow! Welcome to the podcast where we try to inspire better work performance. Thanks for listening.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today on Management Muse. I am your host, Cindi Baldi, and my co-host, the Jeffrey Tumlin from across the room.
Yellow.
And today we are talking about sometimes it's time to leave the ones you love.
Yep.
Except for we're talking about it in a work context.
Yeah. Outgrowing a job, outgrowing a company, and or outgrowing a mentor.
Okay. All right. Where would you like to start?
Start with a guy we know who was, I think, one of the top graduate students in the country in management and was so good that he was on the job market in the best colleges in America and the world. And also his home college called him back. Actually, I'll tell you the way the story went. I forgot this piece of it, but the person I'm thinking of for kind of outgrowing a role is this guy, probably one of the best students going on the market that year, got snatched up by a grade school in America, got interviewed all across the world. And then within 6 months of being in that job, was asked to come back and present a paper at the place that he just left. And they treated him like a student when he was actually like the top assistant professor in the country.
You might have argued he was better than some of the faculty member who, like, he's being treated like less status. Not his mentors. His mentors were amazing. Yeah. But it's like everything, right? Like it's how long you've been in a career. And so like he's a brand new faculty member. But his track record is already so good that he's better than some of the brand new faculty members at the place that he's coming back to.
Who have a few years on him.
Well, maybe. Some of them might have even just been a peer. But I mean, he had a very impressive track record coming out of school. And yet they were treating him like he was a student and not a faculty member, which is really weird because they also felt it very important to try to treat their students like peers, but this is where the system broke down.
I think of this person who's a good friend of ours, and he outgrew where he was. Mm-hmm. And like that's supposed to happen in certain situations, like a child becomes an adult, a student becomes a functioning, student becomes a master kind of, if we want to use it. Like, but this happens all the time in business, that we see people and they talk to us and it takes sometimes a few minutes of the conversation, but basically we come to realize the central problem is that they've outgrown their job, or they've outgrown the company, or a relationship that they have with their boss is no longer as functional as it was, because the student, in your words, has become the master. And they need to go. They need to move on. We see, a lot of times you'll see this in number two roles, deputies, COOs, sometimes CFOs. It doesn't have to be a role like that. But a lot of times in those number two roles, after the number two's been there for a while, usually, number two's pretty squared away. They're ready to call their own shots, but they're still behind the number one. And so there's a shelf life of, like you said at the beginning, people sometimes have to decide, am I going to make the jump? Like that's where it gets often when we're in a coaching conversation with somebody, or we've known them for a little while. And eventually we figure out the problem is like you're ready to play on a bigger chessboard than you're playing. But you love this place. Especially this happens with a lot of number twos. They really like the number ones. And, why am I unmotivated? Or how come we're arguing a lot now? We used to have a better relationship, and we'll listen, but that's not the actual problem. A lot of times the problem is it's time for you to go. And if you're not going to go because you love this place and you love this person and you love this job, then you have to make peace with, for as long as you're staying here,
you're going to be treated like you're.
That's right.
Like, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but you're going to be treated like you're beneath them.
Because you are.
Because hierarchically you are.
Yeah. And you're not going to be the shot caller because you're not.
Right.
And you're going to have to find an outlet for this extra energy, this little restlessness that you feel, because you're not
going to progress.
On
if
to
you want
the
to
next
stay,
challenge.
You're not progressing.
That's right. You're not on to the next challenge. And this happens for a lot of reasons. This happens not just because I'm the number two, but I love the number one. And now do I really want to leave? But it also happens because at some point you've had a lot of success and movement and so forth. And now in your family life, you want to stabilize it so you don't want to move, or you've now arrived at a place where you're making really good money and so you have more to lose. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons that we see. The point of this podcast is some of you listening to this, you think that you've got a motivation problem. Where's my motivation? Or why am I arguing so much with the people? Or your actual problem is you need to leave. Like you have outgrown the job you're in. And
I'll say that it's possible to outgrow the job you're in and still stay in the company.
Yep, you got to recreate the job.
But, you may just flat out may need to ask for a promotion.
Yep, sure.
And signal that you're interested in one. That doesn't necessarily mean that one's going to come available. But if you do like the company and you do like the people you work with, I think that that's step one, is that you have to actually make it clear to them that you're interested in taking on more, and take the chance that they may give you more to kind of prove yourself, with the idea that you're in line for a promotion, and that it won't happen immediately. Because virtually no organization do you go in and go, hey, I think I'm ready for the next job. And they go, great, and put you right in, because there's a budgetary element to it.
Sure.
And there's, also like a need element to it.
Yeah.
And so you got to be prepared, kind of a year, maybe 2 years out, that I feel like if you want to stay at this organization, you have to at least be a year out, I would think.
Right. I wouldn't give them 2.
Well, maybe not. But
a year,
if you want it to be faster than a year, you got to change organizations.
Or you have to be bringing them an offer, which we don't like. So we don't recommend this, but occasionally we're in positions where we're asked to give advice to somebody who's got a job offer, and it's like, hey, I got this job offer, I'm leaving. Well, have you talked to your company? Because I thought you loved this place. Well, I do, but I couldn't get this promotion. Give them a chance. And it's a lot of times, not always, but a lot. I think probably close to, 20% of the time, maybe a third. People we see leave a company for a better job, as soon as they leave, we hear from the decision makers, and they're like, I can't believe they didn't give us a little bit of time.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is that they've got a job in the hand. So it's obviously tricky, because
Very tricky.
It feels like blackmail.
Yep. And a lot of times that backfires.
Right. Because you can really take somebody off. But I do think in this day and age, it's not crazy that somebody on LinkedIn found you and it wasn't a job you were seeking. And that I think is a different conversation, because it's like, look, this actually fell in my lap.
Yeah.
I want to stay here. Is there any way that I can stay here?
Yeah.
But if you're going to do that, you still have to be prepared that like, it's probably not going to happen right away. They still have to go through the budgetary process and all of that to even be able to do that. And so you're probably making a decision about letting go of an opportunity that's in your hand versus taking a risk on the company that you've been with. On the other hand, if you bring it in and they can immediately jump to give you the job and you had asked previously, like all of those pieces have to be present, that's messed up, because that means that they could have given you the job and just chose not to.
Well, I don't know. I mean, so let me, this conversation that you and I are having, we advise on this all the time. And so let me just provide everybody listening with a little free consulting. Here is the normal steps that we encourage people to go through. So they, in a coaching conversation, come to us and say, whatever, I'm losing my motivation. I'm fighting a lot with my boss, or whatever they say, but that's not the thing. The actual thing is, and after a few minutes or hours, depending on,
they're discontent.
That's
the discontent is leaking.
Yeah. And so it takes us a little bit, but eventually figure out, oh, you're not unmotivated. You're not having a relation problem with your boss. You're done. There's nothing else you can gain here. Intellectually, it's time for you to move on. Like, you've outgrown the job. And so the very next thing we say, once we figure that out, is, have you talked to your boss about getting a promotion, staying in the company? Because the vast majority of people we talk to if not love the company they're in. And
they're making the fatal mistake of thinking that because they do good work, that their boss recognizes that they're ready for the next step instead of asking for the next step. Because look,
trash can model.
Right. Like a boss with a good employee isn't thinking about you. If the boss is thinking about you, you are in trouble for the most part. And so this idea that your boss is going to be like, hey, it's time for you to get a promotion. I mean, maybe sometimes, but the vast majority of the time, time is whipping by faster than the person is able to calculate. And they just know you're not a problem and you seem to be content.
Yep. That's right. And there's a million other burning infernos out there that they need to handle.
They got the idiot who, sometimes doesn't show up for a week and yet has a technical skill that they need that's critical to their business. Yep. They're not worried about you. And so I get it. You're probably a good employee and you probably have had people who have done nice things for you. But this gets back to something that we've talked about before. You have to ask for what you want.
Yep. Yeah. And so here's your free consultant. We find out that you've outgrown the job. We say, have you talked to your boss? They almost always say no, or not really. Well, we had a drinks and, I mentioned and, no.
No alcohol needs to be involved in this conversation.
Ask your boss formally. I'm
interested.
I want more.
I'm interested in more.
Yep.
What would I need to do to make me a viable candidate?
What are the options? A lot of times in the coaching, we'll help them think through what are other possibilities? Is it existing jobs? When are those likely to vacate? What's the chance that we can create a new job and put that? And so basically that's step one. Go talk to your boss, see what the possibility is, shape some of that yourself. And then if there's a possibility, then you start a clock. And it runs for about a year that you might be working with the company to try to figure out how to get you that promotion, how to get you those challenges, how to get you...
And kind of prove yourself.
Yeah, sure.
And again, that's for a very limited amount of time, because you don't want the opposite where the new roles just keep
That's right.
dropping
And you're not
on
getting paid
you,
for
and
it.
you're not getting paid
That's right.
anything out extra.
You got to get paid for all of this stuff.
Okay.
We never advise people to take a promotion without pay. And it is shocking to me how often, including
The people who are really squared away.
will take a promotion without pay, or they'll actually say, well, I don't need any pay increase. So I want the promote. Like, why would you do that? In some cases, they're already making good money, but still, it doesn't make
sense.
None of this makes sense. And yet people still come to us willing to do that instead of asking not only for the job they want, but for the money they want as well. And so you ask for the money, you ask for the job. As Cindi says, you don't do it. You don't take on the responsibility. Okay. Oh, you want more? All right. Well, you can take on, this person is retiring. You can take on some of their stuff. Oh, okay, that'd be great. Change my title and give me the money. Well, can you just take it on because we're off budget cycle? No. That's the answer. Like, that's what we advise. I mean, maybe you advise differently, but I advise people, don't take on extra absent a crisis in the company without getting paid for it or having a timeline on it for when you will.
Right.
Yep. Look, I need you to take this on now. We're going to use this, and this will be the fulcrum to next budget cycle in 6 months. We're actually going to get you the raise.
I want to amend it a little bit in that if you're giving them a window and you're starting to take on the tasks, but like there's a window, like other things need to be coming off. Like if things are getting put on, other things need to be coming off. Yes, you're willing to show that you have the technical and maybe even social ability to handle whatever they're putting on your plate. And I understand that, to try to position yourself to get that promotion secured. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that you're doing multiple jobs. And so, you're getting the new skills. You need to get some of the other stuff off your plate as you are moving up skill level wise. And that's part of the negotiation too. Yeah.
Most companies aren't trying to take advantage of you. If that happens, it's inadvertent. It's because you're around and you're good and you say yes too often and don't do this trade-off that Cindi says, where when they're adding stuff, you ask for something to get shifted off. That's our job to say, wait, I can't do all this, or let me get somebody to help me with this piece if I'm adding this piece on. But the basic kind of outline for when we figured out, and it's not hard, we let them talk, we figure out you've outgrown the job. And then usually we say it like, you know what your main problem is? You've outgrown this job. And I've never had somebody fight me on that. They're usually like, yep, I have. All right. Are you going to leave? I don't know. Should I? And then we talk through it. And then, well, I like to stay. Okay. Then we have the conversation with the boss. And then that triggers shaping some of those alternatives. And then that triggers a timeline where you talk to the boss, and the boss says either yes or no, or it's going to, but then the clock starts and you're giving them a certain amount of time, not a ton of it, but yet, as Cindi said, it can be up to a year, maybe 14 months. And then when that timeline expires and you haven't got the job or promotion, then you're going back and you're trying to find out why. And almost always simultaneously, we're advising, go find alternatives. Mm-hmm. Begin the job search, and then only look for and apply for jobs that are actually viable. If you've gone to the company, they say they're trying to help, and then you've given them many months and nothing's happening, and they're past the deadline when they said they would be able to make this happen, or they're not committing to it, then go look for the alternatives. And then we help people look for the alternatives and
figure out their value.
That's right. How much they're really worth.
Because that can be distorted in either direction. We've had people who way undervalued themselves, and we've had people who way overvalued themselves.
Yep.
Because they just hadn't looked in the market.
And the market is maybe not perfect, but it is transparent about how much you're actually going to get. Because don't wild goose chase this thing. Don't apply for a job in Seattle that pays you $80,000 more or $90,000 more than you're making now if you're never going to move to Seattle. Mm-hmm. Only apply to the jobs that you will actually do if you get them,
Well, and obviously moving to like we're sitting in Texas and moving to Seattle, like you got to also consider cost of living too.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you're not going to move. And the fact that it's 80,000 more, we don't need to get too into the weeds because the basic gist of what you're saying is exactly what happens. The reason we're having this conversation is because people often outgrow their jobs.
And that's okay.
And there's often a hesitancy to do something about it.
Because of relationships.
Status quo bias.
Well, I think it's two things, right? Like one is probably a degree of fear that's related to uncertainty, right? Like I might not have it as good as I have it right now.
Yeah, sure.
Or just even when you don't have it good, at least it's the bad you know versus the bad it might be. And so there's a level of uncertainty that keeps people in. Yeah. And then I think there's also, separately, they may both coexist, but they may just also operate separately. I think that if you are in a place where you really do care about the people that you work with, it's very hard to leave.
Sure. Yeah. I'm not disputing any of that.
I will say that, like we've talked about it from the employee standpoint, I think there's also a management standpoint with people who are transitioning out, like when roles have expired. Don't be mad at these people. Like they never committed to you for a lifetime relationship. Whatever amount of time they gave you where they were good employees, that was a bonus. And they learned what they could learn from you. They probably appreciate you. And too often we see leadership blow up good relationships with people who were like their greatest fans because their feelings get hurt because they left.
Right. Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
And they loved you. They just needed to move on with their life.
Yep.
Appreciate the time you had.
Yeah. Yeah, because there will be a difference sometimes. Yeah. Cindy's, without giving away who Cindy's thinking about, in that instance, the person who left basically believed that he was ready for a job 2 levels up, and nobody in the organization thought that. But I'll be darned if he didn't go out and get himself a job 2 levels up. And they were
well from
wrong
what I know.
And hurt.
Right.
And
because they had invested in him.
Yeah.
And they thought that they were going to have more time, but sometimes it's not on your clock, it's on their clock.
Yeah. And they thought he wasn't ready.
Yes, but that is also self-serving, right? Like he's not ready because we love him here and we want him to stay, and he does all these extra things.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just a difference of opinion.
Hello, Musers. Now it's time for commercial break.
All right. So as you know, Cindy and her company, Culture, C-U-L-S-U-R-E, they can measure anything. So we're on some merger projects now. Companies thinking about joining forces. And she can measure what's company A's culture like, what's company B's, where do they fit, where do they not fit. If you're thinking about acquiring a company, we're in another company thinking about buying a company, actually 2, because 1's not enough and 3's too many. Cindy can look at this company you're looking at buying. What are their core beliefs? What are their values? How is their communication flowing? Mm-hmm. And look at how that's likely to marry up into yours. You've already done the financial analysis, but do you actually know what's going on inside of the company with the people you're counting on to do the work and add the value? Cindy knows how to measure that. Call her. Culture, C-U-L-S-U-R-E. Do not merge, acquire, or otherwise partner yourself up, even a joint venture, unless you know what you're getting into.
Hey, if you're getting married, you should really talk to me.
Right. Haven't you dated?
Just kidding.
Haven't you dated enough people where you're like, man, I should have thought through that a little more? Culture.com. She'll help your merger, acquisition, or joint venture get off on the right foot. Culture.com, CULSURE. There's a famous example of this it's been years ago. Let's be probably the only sports analogy that we ever use, but it was
Certainly won't be coming from me.
Pete Carroll was the head coach of the USC football team, and their quarterback was a junior, maybe, or sophomore, and he decided to go out for the draft. And the coach didn't think he was ready for the NFL. I forget the person's name. And it was a big deal because the guy was really good, and he was leaving the program. And so they did a press conference, and in the press conference, the coach tried to be nice, and Pete Carroll, was pretty well known as, I think a pretty good coach and solid guy. I don't know anything about the guy, but basically in the press conference, he basically said, I don't think he's ready, and I told him so. Which is the guy's about to go out for the NFL, and
you're just shooting him down because
for all we know, you just cost this guy $20 million.
Right, because every coach is listening to what you just said about him. You have the most intimate knowledge about him.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I follow no sports, but I can remember this clip pretty close to somebody's interested in this. But the basic, what he said was, I've had a conversation with him, and he knows I think he's not ready or that he should stay. Basically, that is what the guy said during a press conference, and the quarterback is sitting right here. And
I almost think I remember that clip.
Yeah. And the coach, I don't think meant to
torpedo his career
and to hurt him. But it's part of the dynamic that you mentioned of when you're ready, you're ready. Most of the time, in our experience, your boss also knows you're ready. But sometimes there will be a difference of opinion. And go with what you think.
And sometimes, I think it's part of maturing as a manager. I think that a manager or a leader who is really attached to the organization, when somebody leaves it, I think they feel like it's a personal rejection.
Sure.
And so it's not actually all that uncommon to see that when somebody leaves, that there's a negative backlash.
Yeah.
But don't do that.
Yep. Yeah.
You can't help but feel what you feel, but you got to talk yourself off that ledge because they did not make a lifetime commitment to you.
Yeah. Be
glad for the time you had.
Yeah.
Be glad they were a good employee and be happy for them.
Yeah. Yeah. The endings matter. I tell a Howard Prince story. One of our mentors, Cindi and I have been lucky because we sat at the University of Texas for a number of years. So we had a couple shared mentors. Howard Prince is one. I would say John Daly is another. Mm-hmm. And then we each had other people kind of take us under their wing. Like Mark Knapp for me, but not so much for you.
No, not so much for me, but I do love Mark Knapp.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you had on your side, you had Janet Dugrich for you, but not really, that was your thing. We were just weirdly unusual in that we have a couple shared mentors. One of them was a company commander in Vietnam. And within so many weeks of being a company commander in Vietnam, they were doing a mission and one of his soldiers got killed. And after dinner, a couple of the soldiers came to him and asked if they could do a memorial. And, Howard realized oh, yeah, of course, of course. And so they put together, a couple items, a helmet and all this. I mean, the guy was gone, right? But the couple items, people said a few words, somebody did a prayer. So it was a memorial. And immediately Howard realized we have to do this every time, because not only is it honoring the dead, but importantly for those of us still here, it's telling all of them that their service mattered and that their time here mattered. Now take it into corporate America where we work. I can't tell you how many times I've had employees say to me, like, I just found out that so-and-so isn't here anymore.
Yeah,
how come nobody told me?
Yeah.
Right. And we always recommend the same thing to the CEO or HR, whoever. You need to document your ins and outs in some way. Who's coming and who's going. There's a place we work now that's really good at their big healthcare system. And in their quarterly meetings, it's one slide, but it's who's come in and then the people who've left and how long they served. And every healthcare provider is on this video call and they see it 4 times a year. And so there's this knowledge that the loss, though it may be surprising and it may hurt a little, is recognized and the service is honored. And, we don't spend a lot of time talking big philosophical stuff here too often, but like, work is honorable and people get up, do their hair, fight traffic, and leave their family to punch a keyboard for your company and give the best they can for hours and hours a day for many days, weeks, months, and years. And the least we can do is recognize that, no matter if they're retiring or if they're leaving for another job.
I think that when you just let people leave your organization and because I've heard the sentiment too in many of the places, and they're like, I don't know, they just disappear. All of a sudden I find out this person isn't here. Like, all that does is send to your people a message that the employees there aren't all that important, that they're not all that valued. And if that's not the message you want to send, then you need to note the exits.
Yep.
For what, even when you're upset, note the exit, and say something nice about them, market.
Yep.
We have one of our favorite CEOs and he's getting ready to retire. And I just had this conversation with him because I said, so let me know when you're going to have your retirement party and I'll come. And he said, oh, I'm not going to have a retirement party. And I said, oh, yes, you are.
Right. You can't just walk away.
No, because that also says, even though he's a CEO, that also says that the time didn't mean anything to him.
Yeah. Did you talk him into it?
Oh, I informed him that even if I have to throw it, he's having it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in this case, the guy's...
He's one of my favorite people.
Yeah. And he's a big introvert. And
that's why he's doing it.
Yeah. He's a little bit shy, but...
And definitely doesn't like to be the center of focus.
Tough. Yeah. Tough because he's the CEO, the actual and symbolic leader of a pretty good sized company. And they need, your company needs that. I mean, I read a stat a couple of years ago. Yeah, they need to be able to
say goodbye to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I read a stat a couple of years ago about when the CEO leaves, a third of the other senior leaders leave within 2 years. Not because there's anything wrong with it. It's just, it's the end of an era.
Right. And I mean, we do need to like, say that like the goal is to, if it's good leadership, and we've said it before, if it's good leadership, then the goal is that the organization transitions completely smooth because you had things so well worked out that there's no hiccups. Like that's the goal. It's not that I leave and the place falls apart. And that's not him at all.
Yeah.
Like he's absolutely trying to leave this place in stellar condition.
Yeah.
But you do have to, like, you had an impact on people and they need to be able to say goodbye.
Yep. Yeah. I'll tell you a story. This doesn't kind of show me in my best light, but we had a guy when I was in the Army leave our unit for the best Ranger competition, which is a big deal. And you train for it for a year, but the impact to the unit was, it was basically like applying for another job. He applied to be in this competition and then he got it. And so he leaves your unit, but your unit carries the place. So it makes a whole. And so we carried a whole, right? Because I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but basically because the Army does not recognize that that is a job. The Army says that's your platoon leader, but the unit says this competition is so important, we're going to let them train for a year.
Right.
And so when people get selected to it, you lose them.
Yeah, you don't have that. They're training. You don't have anybody doing their job.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so he didn't talk to anybody. It was like he applied for another job and he got it, and then he informed us. And because the job was at a level higher, there's nothing we could do. And so we like, did you talk to anybody? No. Oh, and you're going to do this? And yes. You're screwing us for a year. We're not going to, but if we win, it'll be great for the unit and but like most people don't win, right? It's like going to the Olympics.
Right. Only one person actually wins.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of really good Rangers out there. Yeah. Nate Self, and not me, but there's a lot of really good people out there. And anyway, he went away, vanished for a year, did fine, but didn't win. They didn't win. And so then his time is up. He comes back and he needs to leave the unit. And the unit has what we call a hail and farewell, which is roughly every month, because there's such a high velocity of turnover in the Army. Normal, you're only there a couple of years, right? 2 to 3 years. That you're turning over the whole unit. And so every month we did this hail and farewell. For the new people, you welcome them, and for the old, you send them away. But thanks for your service, and then you give them a little something, right? Something pretty significant. And he came back, and he's like, and when's my farewell? And we're like, we're just going to give you your gift. And he's like, what? And it wasn't my call, but I was transitioning into the job where I would have had a say in it. And so the guy, it was really, a friend of mine and then our boss who were like, yeah, he can just get his stuff. And we didn't let the guy have his farewell.
Wow.
And that tore the guy up. And in the benefit of now, with the benefit of being a 50-year-old, like I regret that.
Mm.
Like we shouldn't have done that. He needed
a goodbye.
Yeah. And he had served us for 2 years, just not for 3. And in that 3rd year.
And I think he looked at what he did as serving.
Of course. And we again, we were a little wrapped up. He sprung it on us, and then he screwed us for a year. We carried a hole. And a platoon sergeant had to cover that job. It was a hole, and we covered it. And then he, but we screwed that guy and we shouldn't have done that. And I regret, I possibly was in a position to where I could have said, come on, let's let the guy, and they probably would have been okay with it, but I didn't.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes somebody just has to say it. Like,
Yeah.
I get where they were like, well, he's already been gone.
Right.
So we'll just give him the gift. But I think somebody pointing it out and being like, well, he seems to really want this. And why wouldn't we give it to him?
Yeah. We should have honored his 2 years.
Right.
Instead, we held the third year against him.
Right.
And denied him his actual, goodbye. And we shouldn't have done that. That doesn't, it's embarrassing to talk about it now, but
that's how you learn.
Yeah. And it's something that maybe is one little piece of why we're adamant about honoring the people who leave. And it's an interesting conversation because we so often see people who have outgrown their company or their job. And a lot of times they don't leave. And then when they do,
it's like I always, because I grew up in small businesses where it's not going to take you very long to actually outgrow your job. In fact, a lot of the people we hired were high schoolers because it's just built into the cake. Most of these jobs are not super long-term jobs. They're not a career, they're a job. But there were occasionally a few people who hung around and, wouldn't take very long for them to sour. That's what I always called it.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah. Their whole attitude becomes toxic because they're staying.
Yeah.
But they really,
yeah,
they know they're not moving on and they ought to. And there have been times where for some stellar employees, Tommy, I'm talking about you as an example. We went out of our way to try to make sure that they figured out how to progress.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which included trying to make sure that they got the certifications that they needed to move on with their life. Because, at some point, we're going to miss you because you're good at what you do. But if you're being held back to the point where you start disliking what you're doing, it doesn't matter that you're good at what you do.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. 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 It's interesting. It's tricky. Maybe I've told too many Army stories, but I'm thinking of another case, kind of the flip side of this, where we had an amazing soldier. This was a good friend of ours, Sean Lux, was a part of this. And basically he was so amazing that everybody wanted him to become an officer. And we were actually talking about sending him to West Point and trying to make that happen. And the guy didn't want to go, and he didn't want to become an officer. And a bunch of us just kept pushing. And eventually, as I was leaving the Army, I think it was maybe Sean, or it could have been a friend of ours named Bill Hayes, asked me to talk to him. And I tried too hard to kind of push him to become an officer. And I actually damaged our relationship. And it's
you got to respect the boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah. It's this other weird little piece of, most of the time when a person has outgrown the job in the company, they know it, and so does their boss. Sometimes there will be disagreement and the person has outgrown it and they know it, but the boss doesn't believe it, in which case, trust the person in the job for the reasons you mentioned. I just wanted to give a little airtime to, sometimes it's the bosses who actually say you've outgrown this, and the person either doesn't believe it or doesn't want to believe it. And so all of those cases can happen. And we can think of examples where they've happened, but usually there's agreement between the boss and the employee that they've outgrown the role. And the question is, can those two people do anything about it? And that usually kicks off a multi-month negotiation of trying to figure out what the company might be able to do, how the job might be able to be redesigned, what the person may be able to shed or add to the job, et cetera. And, that sometimes culminates in them so long running on the clock that they actually look for opportunities and find one. And then that comes back to the boss. And then that's just what we usually just recommend: honesty. And then trying to see in the 11th hour, can the company do anything or not? And your point a number of minutes ago is that sometimes people bring that offer, and then all of a sudden the company's able to do something, and you think that's a little messed up. And I don't dispute that 100%. But go back to our season 1 trash can model. Sometimes the blockage you can't see. It's not your boss, it's your boss's boss, or it's not your boss, it's HR. And they actually couldn't come off of it. And yeah, it's messed up. So I guess maybe I agree with you on that. But sometimes it's not messed up.
It's not messed up necessarily with your boss, but it's still an organizational problem, because if your boss actually tried to get you the job and like you turn around and you're like, hey, I got this other offer.
Yeah.
And then the organization's like, well, okay, well, now we can do it for you because you might leave us.
Sure.
That is messed up.
Yep.
It just doesn't necessarily mean it's your boss that's messed up. It could be, like you said, there's a block that we can't see.
Yep.
But
yeah,
why do I want to be in a company I have to strong arm to do what's right for me?
Their answer to that is because I love the people, because it's an HR problem. I'm thinking of a company right now that's got a jacked up HR, but the rest of the company's great. And so the answer is, well, why would I stay in a company that couldn't get me the job until I came with the reason is because it's HR's fault. And you're never going to deal with them again. And as soon as you get this job and you get the money and you get the promotion, you're good for another 5 to 7 years. That's why. And
yeah, I think that's a pretty special case. And even then, I still think it's pretty messed up. And I'm not sure I'd want to have to deal with it.
Yeah. And we don't recommend hardball tactics where you work, because work is relational and people have a long memory. And
they may give it to you right now, but they give it to you with a gigantic target that they're going to put on your back.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. It's not complicated. This we've done so many times, it's not complicated. By the time we identify somebody's outgrown the job, we try to generate internal options if they want to stay. That takes a while. You give it a chance to play out. At some point, it's been long enough, they start looking for external. And then eventually, most people land one or realize they can't with their constraints. Usually they don't want to move. Their kids are in school. And so then we have a different conversation. Now you got to make peace with it. And usually, what I do is I tell them, let's go find a good hobby. And let's throw all this energy you have into something outside of work. Because you're bored with this job because you've outgrown it.
Yeah, the job no longer becomes your primary.
But they're not going to do anything because you're great at it. And you're not going to do anything because you want your kids to get through high school.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, you need to join the choir, or you need to join the drone club of San Diego, or whatever.
Right.
So that you're able to
That seems very specific. The Drone Club of San Diego.
The Drone Club of San Diego. Yeah. So that you're very specifically, you're able to use some of that energy that you're not putting, intellectual energy that you're not putting into your job. You have an outlet for it to try.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that I'm opposed to hobbies, but if it's like an intellectual stimulation, that
maybe not the Drone
may
Club.
not be the hobby. That it may not be hobbies as much as like maybe you're doing something for like a side hustle, or maybe, which again, go cautiously into that. We cover that in another topic, another episode. Or it's that like you're just going to take the time to learn what you want to learn.
Yeah.
To then leapfrog. Okay, I'll stick around for a while.
Yeah.
Because I got to wait 4 years for my youngest to get through high school.
Yep.
But in 4 years, I'm going to have a different degree or certification, whatever it is. So that way I can go after the job I actually really want.
We're having this conversation because of all of the biases people have to certainty, stability, and the status quo causes them to stick around in jobs that they've outgrown a little longer than they should. That leads to the negative outcomes, boredom. It can lead to performance drop. It can lead to phantom problems where now you're fighting with your boss, but it's because you're bored. And stuff bothers you now that didn't bother you before because you were too busy actually working and learning. And
right. Now you've got time on your hands and you can look around and now you don't think your boss is all that smart.
Yep. And the solution isn't complicated. A lot of stuff we deal with is complicated. This isn't complicated. You've outgrown the job. You need to retool the job or go get another one. And then, as we talked about, there's a fairly predictable process that we encourage people to go through. And then get into the next thing and continue your journey, or make peace with where you are and try to stop spinning up phantom problems and actually do well in that role and be content and let it ride for the period of time you need to let it ride before you're either have hit your retirement or you're able to
move. Whatever the constraint was has changed.
Yep. Yeah.
All right. That's it.
That's it.
It's a wrap. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on Management Muse. We are a podcast / YouTube channel that we hope is entertaining and educational. If you are on YouTube, we would appreciate you subscribing and maybe leaving a comment and a like. If you are on any of the podcasts listening to this, we would appreciate stars, following, comments, all the good stuff. We want to say thank you to Christina, Sarah, and Rebecca, and then, of course, everybody at Design at Work. And then just as a last-minute reminder, we also want to mention that we are management and communication professionals working in the field, but also have degrees that back us in science. All that being said, we are talking in generalities on this podcast. We do not actually know your particular situation. So proceed with common sense and maybe a little bit of experimentation on your end. And we hope that you make the world a more beautiful place by making work a more enjoyable place. See you next time on Management Muse.